It's like love has an expiration date. In the beginning, your eyes lock like the universe orchestrated some kind of cosmic match. Everything just flows. The conversations, the touches, even the silences. Everything fits together. Then, without you even realizing it, that same person who made you feel like you were in paradise starts dragging you into a maze of demands, frustrations, and confusing feelings. What happened? Where did that love go? That love that felt so real? Maybe the most dangerous lie you've been told about love is exactly this: the idea that true love heals everything. That if you just love hard enough, pour your heart into it fully, intensely, everything will fall into place. But that's not love. That's anesthesia. Worse yet, it's an anesthesia that covers up wounds you never even knew were there. Stick with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. There's an unconscious force that pulls us toward certain people. It's not chemistry. It's not destiny. It's not some divine algorithm deciding who's meant for you. It's deeper and more unsettling. It's your shadow. According to Jungian psychology, and don't worry, you don't have to be a psychologist to get this, the shadow is everything about yourself that you've pushed aside. Those traits you refuse to see. Your fear of abandonment. Your neediness hidden under the guise of independence. Your jealousy disguised as detachment. All of that gets swept under the rug of consciousness. But guess what? It doesn't disappear. In fact, it creates an invisible magnet that draws you precisely to the people who will trigger the parts of you that you'd rather deny. Have you been there? Falling in love with someone who seemed like exactly what you needed, only to have them gradually reveal everything you didn't want to see about yourself? That's where the conflict begins. Because it's not just that the other person is being themselves. They're acting as a mirror, reflecting back what you avoid looking at. And how do we deal with that? We idealize them. We try to transform the other person into who we fantasize they could be. We fall for the illusion that with a little more love, more patience, more devotion, they'll change. But the truth is something else. It's not about changing the other person. It's about recognizing what they're revealing in you. And once you understand that, once you start noticing these invisible signs in your relationships, everything changes. You stop asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" and start asking, "What inside me is creating this pattern?" It's a huge mental shift, but it's liberating. We need to talk about this, about how love, when it's not conscious, becomes a minefield of dangerous projections, about how we're drawn, not to people who will complete us, but to people who confront us with our own wounds, and about how it's precisely in that discomfort, in the crisis, in the disappointment, that we find a rare opportunity for growth. But hold on, we're not there yet. Because before we can figure out how to break this cycle and free ourselves from this emotional trap, we need to understand the real role the other person plays in your love life. And that is what we're about to explore now. Why you fall for people who will end up hurting you. The truth is that a lot of times you don't fall in love with someone who's going to heal you. You fall in love with someone who, without knowing it, touches exactly the wound you've spent your life trying to hide. It's like there's a hidden compass inside you, guiding your steps toward someone who, unknowingly, is going to show you what still needs to be integrated, healed, and embraced. And that compass is the shadow. That's why you might feel inexplicably drawn to emotionally unavailable people. People who give you crumbs of affection and keep you on a merry-go-round of unmet expectations. Or maybe the opposite. People who are too intense, who smother you, who invade your space, who put you on a pedestal as some sort of savior, only to knock you down later when you don't live up to their fantasy. In both cases, what seems like love is actually disguised projection. You start believing you've found someone special, but deep down, you're just recreating a dynamic you already know. A familiar feeling, sometimes painful, but oddly comforting. The shadow looks for what's missing, and in the attempt to become whole, you end up addicted to whatever confirms that you're incomplete. And look, if this resonates with you, if something here really hit home, maybe reminding you of a particular relationship or a feeling you couldn't explain, leave a comment telling me what struck you the most. It's through sharing that we recognize ourselves in each other. And when you leave a comment, you not only help others feel less alone, but you also keep this conversation alive. Because this channel isn't just made of ideas, it's made of people. Real experiences, real stories that intertwine. If you feel like you want to keep diving into these reflections, if this way of looking at love, at yourself, at another person, stirs something deep inside you, hit the like button on this video. It might seem like a small gesture, but it's how we expand the reach of this message. It's how we show the algorithm that this content is worth sharing. And subscribe to the channel too, because what's coming next goes even deeper. Your presence here is what makes all of this possible. Now that you've started seeing how the shadow influences your relationship choices, we can go further, because understanding the problem is just the first step. The next one, maybe the toughest, is learning how to recognize when this is happening in real life, even when it feels like love, even when every part of you wants to believe that this time it'll be different. When passion turns to control, the start of the toxic cycle. Now I want to go even deeper, because understanding the power of the shadow when you choose a partner is just the beginning. The real impact shows up when that passion that once felt magical slowly starts turning into control, and it doesn't happen suddenly. It's subtle, almost impossible to detect. On the surface, it still looks like affection, attention, being there for each other. But behind those romantic gestures, there's this little noise, a discomfort you can't name, a sense of being watched, monitored, suffocated. This is where the shadow really kicks in. When it's not acknowledged, it doesn't vanish. It seeps in, and it shows up as fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of reliving that old abandonment wound that never fully healed, hidden under the makeup of a new chance. The passion morphs into attachment. Care turns into jealousy disguised as concern. Love starts to blend with control. Maybe you've experienced this. In the beginning, he said he worried about you so much that he just had to know where you were, who you were with, what you were doing. He said it was just because he cares, because he loves you so much. But little by little, that attention became demands, became insecurity he projected onto you. You started feeling guilty for going out, for smiling too much at someone, for taking too long to reply to a message. And when you tried to set a boundary, he said you were pulling away, that you're not the same anymore. Suddenly, you didn't even recognize yourself because you were trying so hard to be everything the other person needed to feel secure. Toxic relationships don't start off toxic. They start off intense, with that emotional whirlwind like something out of a movie, where both people complete each other, understand each other, want each other like nothing else matters. But the shadow always whispers before it screams. It leaves little signs, quiet signs, but obvious if you know where to look. And a lot of those signs can be found in the things we've learned to romanticize. Like when someone says, "I'm nothing without you." It sounds like poetry, like total devotion, but it's actually emotional dependency wrapped up as deep love. Or when someone accuses you of playing games just because you decided not to reply instantly. That's not passion. It's possessiveness disguised as connection. Or when you start giving in, just a bit, just this once, just to avoid conflict. And before you know it, you've stopped wearing what you like, talking to who you like, being who you are. You dim your own light to fit into the other person's fear. It's a slow process, like a fog that settles in until you can't see yourself clearly in the mirror anymore. And the scariest part is that it can all happen with the best of intentions, because the shadow doesn't show up as some cartoon villain. It shows up as a wounded part of you that just wants to feel loved. And when you don't acknowledge it, it starts running the show on autopilot, sabotaging everything it touches. By that point, the relationship has ceased to be a space for growth. It's become a silent battlefield. You find yourself going in circles trying to save something that's no longer love, but an unconscious game of control and submission. And then you catch yourself saying things like, "But he was so amazing at first," or "We're so deeply connected, it must be worth another try." But here's the real question. Is it true connection or emotional dependency? Is it love, or is it your own shadow clinging to the idea of not being abandoned again? These questions are tough. They shake us up. But they're the very questions that can spark real transformation. Because what starts out as a whirlwind romance can quickly become an emotional prison if you're not aware of what you're projecting and what you're tolerating in the name of idealized love. The hidden truth behind these cycles is that they're not about luck. They're not about bad luck in love. They're reflections of an inner journey that's incomplete, a journey that calls for awareness, courage, and taking responsibility for yourself. And it starts, above all, with an honest look inward. Drop a comment. I'm on this journey too. Let's keep going. We still have more layers to uncover. The hard truth. You're also part of the problem. For the first time, you step out of the victim role and begin to see what's actually happening behind the scenes, driving your choices. And this isn't about dismissing your pain. It's an invitation to freedom. Because as long as you stick to the narrative that you only attract the wrong people, you'll keep trying to fix what's out there, not realizing the root cause is in here. The most transformative truth is also the most uncomfortable. You are part of the problem. But that also means you can be part of the solution. This isn't about blaming yourself for loving someone who hurt you. It's about realizing why you stayed in that situation for so long. Which part of you believed that was all you deserved? Which wound was begging to be acknowledged in that relationship? Which unmet need was getting filled, even at the expense of your peace? These are painful questions, yes, but they're also the ones that start to open the door to healing. Because the shadow that pulls you toward that intensity, that passion, that emotional roller coaster, is the same shadow you didn't want to see in yourself. The neediness you think only the other person has might also be inside you. The fear you condemn in them might be hiding behind your "I'm totally fine on my own" mask. The desire to control that you judge in your partner might actually reflect your own inability to trust. And when you start looking at all this with courage, not judging yourself, but sincerely wanting to understand, something deep inside you begins to reorganize. This is often where people give up, because facing yourself requires a different kind of strength. Not the strength to resist pain, but the strength to welcome it, to sit with it, to ask what it wants to show you. And that requires presence. It requires quiet moments. It requires a level of honesty that doesn't fit into everyday distractions. But it's also the start of a real transformation. When you realize that a lot of what you project onto the other person are your own unrecognized aspects, the dynamic changes. You no longer get into relationships expecting the other person to save you. You walk in knowing what you have to offer and what you still need to work on within yourself. And no matter how unsettling that might feel, that awareness is what breaks the repeating cycle. Because you won't react the same way anymore. You won't accept the same emotional scraps. You'll no longer mistake intensity for love. You start making new choices, and those choices change everything. The hidden truth behind your relationship patterns doesn't just show up in the other person's behavior. It shows up in how you handle your own emptiness, expectations, and fears. It's in the mindset you nourish without even realizing it. It's in the way you abandon yourself just to avoid being abandoned by someone else. And that's not a source of shame. It's a starting point. Maybe for the first time, you can see that what attracted you to that person wasn't really love, it was familiarity. It was the echo of something old. And that magnetic pull you mistook for fate was actually an opportunity for healing disguised as passion. A revelation you could only access if you were willing to see yourself fully, both your light and your shadow. And acknowledging your shadow doesn't make you weak. It makes you real. It frees you from the illusion of perfect love and brings you to a place where love can actually be genuine. Because only what's whole can be real, and no one is whole while they're internally fragmented. This is where the game changes. When you stop waiting for love to save you and start understanding that it just reveals where your deepest wounds are. And that's where the real journey begins. The journey of someone who decides to grow, even if it means letting go of a fantasy. Of someone who chooses to evolve, even if it means saying goodbye to a version of themselves that no longer makes sense. Leave a comment. That resonates with me. Now I want to go even deeper into this. How to turn your shadow into an ally, not an emotional trap. Now I want to dive even deeper. Because recognizing your shadow isn't the end of the road. It's the start of a new journey. A journey where you stop operating on autopilot, blindly repeating patterns, and begin making choices with awareness. Maybe the biggest mindset shift here is realizing that your shadow isn't an enemy to be destroyed. It's a part of you that's begging to be heard. It wants to belong. It doesn't want to be hidden or ignored or judged anymore. It just wants to be acknowledged. That's where real change begins. When you stop fighting against who you are and start integrating the parts of yourself you're ashamed to feel. Anger, neediness, jealousy, fear of rejection, they all belong to you. And as long as you try to hide these emotions, they'll keep steering your relationships from behind the scenes. But when you face them head on, they become allies. They show you where you're still wounded, where you still need self-love, where you're still relating from a place of lack rather than wholeness. So, how do you do this in practice? First, create internal spaces for listening to yourself. Have conversations with yourself. Yes, real internal dialogues. Instead of judging your reaction, ask, what exactly did I feel right then? What does it remind me of? What deeper pain got triggered? Simple questions, but they'll pull you away from the surface-level behavior and bring you down to the emotional root. Another powerful tool is reflective writing. Grab a notebook, or open a note on your phone, and jot down the patterns you see repeating. What kinds of people are you drawn to? What triggers throw you off balance? When do you feel like you have to shrink yourself to be accepted? Writing becomes a mirror that reveals way more than we realize, as long as we're being honest. And of course, therapy is a safe place to explore these layers more deeply. Not because it hands you ready-made answers, but because it offers a clean, undistorted mirror where you can see yourself more clearly. Sometimes just speaking out loud about something you've kept inside for years can start the process of letting go. Therapy isn't about fixing, it's about awareness. It's about seeing yourself with new eyes. And that changes everything. Because what really ties us to dysfunctional relationships isn't the other person. It's the distorted idea of ourselves that we're seeking to validate in those relationships. When you begin to see yourself more kindly, even the parts in shadow, you don't need anyone else to fill you up. You start choosing differently, not out of fear of being alone, but out of love for your own presence. Here's a revelation many people still resist. A healthy relationship isn't one where the shadow never shows up. It's one where it does show up and gets welcomed. Where you can say, today I feel insecure, or that really affected me, or this reminds me of an old wound I have, and still be loved. Where the other person isn't your therapist or a broken mirror, but a partner who walks alongside you as you keep rebuilding from within. That's the real power of turning your shadow into an ally. It becomes a compass, a bridge, a tool for self-discovery. It stops dragging you into emotional traps and starts teaching you about real emotional maturity. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, a journey. But it's the most important journey you can choose because it's the only one that truly takes you home, to yourself. Type in the comments, I'm on this journey too. If you made it this far, it's because something in this content really spoke to you. And that's what makes this exchange so valuable. It's not just about listening, it's about feeling together. So if this message resonated with you, if at any point you saw yourself in these words, leave a comment saying, I'm with you till the end. It's a simple way to show that this conversation touched you. And who knows, inspire others to look inward too. Subscribe to the channel to keep going on this journey with me. Here we don't talk about perfection. We talk about truth, about awareness, about real transformation. And if this video gave you new perspectives, insights, or even just that thoughtful silence, hit the like button. That's how I know it's worth digging deeper into topics like this and how we keep this connection growing. There's a video here on the side that complements everything we've talked about today. Click it and keep going with me. We'll dive even further.